WorldComEDU. Elite Children's Classics.
Rip Van Winkle. Many years ago, there was a small village at the foot of the Catskill Mountains. In the village, there lived a simple good man named Rip Van Winkle. His wife asked him to do a lot of work, and he often quarreled with her about that. Rip was very kind to his neighbors, and he was a great favorite with them. Rip's wife did not like this. Rip liked children. He used to make toys for them. He used to tell them many interesting stories. He never scolded the children. He was liked by all the children in the village. He liked fishing very much. He often sat on a wet rock with the fishing pole in hand. He could fish all day long without saying anything. He also liked hunting. He would carry a shotgun on his shoulder and walk about for hours through the woods. He would go up the hills and down the valleys. He would shoot a few squirrels or wild pigeons. Rip was always helpful, but he did not like to work on his own farm. His farm was not good. It was the worst in the village. He worked hard, but everything went wrong. The fences fell down, and his cows ate his cabbages. When he went to his field, the rain began to fall. He was always unlucky. He was the poorest farmer in the neighborhood. His children were poorly dressed. His son wore his father's old clothes. The clothes were too big for the boy to wear. Rip, too, was poorly dressed. He was so poor that he couldn't afford to buy new clothes. Those who knew him said he was strange. But Rip Van Winkle never worried about that. He would rather lie on the grass with only a penny than work on the farm for a pound. He wanted to have his own way, but his wife never let him. She scolded Rip and said, "You are idle and careless. You make us unhappy." When Rip was shouted at in that way, he would only shake his head and go out of the house without answering back. Wolf, his dog, was Rip's best friend. But Rip's wife did not like Wolf. As soon as Wolf came into the house, his head fell and his tail curled between his legs. Mrs. Van Winkle's tongue became sharper and sharper as the years went on. When Rip was driven from home, he used to meet with friends and talk with them on the beach in front of a small inn. But Rip's wife would suddenly appear there, and unlucky Rip would be driven away from this place too. Poor Rip had no place to go. He wanted to escape from his wife. He often sat at the foot of a tree and ate lunch with his dog. Rip said to his dog, "Poor Wolf, what a miserable life you lead. But never mind, I am always with you." Wolf was glad to hear that and wagged his tail. One fine day in fall, Rip was walking up one of the Catskill Mountains with Wolf. He became quite tired, so he sat down on the grass. Between the trees, he could see the lower country many miles away. He saw the Hudson River far away. He saw some ships moving slowly. On the other side, he could look down into deep green woods. The sun was setting, and the mountains looked very beautiful. Rip lay there looking down for some time. The long shadows moved over the valley. "It will be dark before I can get home," Rip said to himself. He thought, "My wife may get angry with me." When he was going down the mountain, he heard a voice. It said, "Rip Van Winkle! Rip Van Winkle!" He stopped and looked around, but he could not see anything. A crow was flying alone across the mountain. He began to go down again. Then he heard the same voice. "Rip Van Winkle! Rip Van Winkle!" Just then he saw Wolf standing on a big rock. It was looking down the valley. Rip, too, looked down the valley. There he saw a strange man, slowly coming up the valley. He was a short, old man with thick hair and a gray beard. On his shoulder, he was carrying something heavy. Rip was surprised to find a man in such a lonely place, but he was kind. He hurried down to help him. The thing which he carried was a big keg. It seemed to be full of wine. Rip helped the man, and they took turns carrying the keg as they climbed up a narrow valley. Rip often heard a rolling sound like thunder. It seemed to come out of high rocks in a deep valley. They went on toward the sound. At last they came to a wide place which was surrounded by tall trees and big rocks. Rip could see the blue sky and the bright evening clouds through the trees and rocks. The strange man said nothing. Rip wondered, why does he carry a keg of wine up the mountain? When they got to a big cave, Rip saw some people playing ninepins. They were dressed in old Dutch-style clothes with long knives in their belts. Most of them had breeches like the man who was carrying the keg. It was very strange that they were enjoying themselves without saying anything to one another. The noise of the balls which they rolled echoed along the mountains like thunder. When Rip and the short man went near them, they suddenly stopped playing and looked at Rip and the short man. Rip's knees were shaking. They poured the wine from the keg into large jugs and began to drink in silence. Then they returned to their game. Rip tasted a little of the wine. He liked the flavor very much, so he began to drink more and then fell into a deep sleep. When he woke up, he found himself on the green grass. It was the place where Rip first saw the strange man with the keg. It was a bright, sunny morning. Birds were singing among the trees, and an eagle was flying in the sky. Rip asked himself, "Did I sleep here all night?" He thought about the strange man with the keg, the valley among the mountains, the game the strange man had played, and the jug. "Oh, the jug! That bad jug!" thought Rip. "It made me sleep. My wife will get angry with me. What shall I do?" On the grass near him, he found an old shotgun. Wolf was not around. He called his name, but Wolf did not appear. He wanted to go back to his village. He tried to walk, but he could not walk well. "The night air in the mountains isn't good for me," he thought. He walked down the valley with some difficulty. He came to the place where he had seen the strange people. To his surprise, there were wild grapevines and bushes all around, and a stream was flowing down the valley. Rip looked for the strange men, the keg, and the jug, but he could not find any of them. "What happened last night? Did I dream a strange dream?" he asked himself. He was afraid of meeting his wife, but felt hungry. With a heavy heart, he turned toward home. When Rip came near the village, he met a number of people, but he knew none of them. Their clothes were very different from Rip's. They were very surprised to see his beard, which was about 1 foot long. Some children were on the road. A lot of new houses were along the road. Strange houses, strange faces. Everything was strange to Rip. He rubbed his eyes and looked around. This was surely the village where he was born, wasn't it? He found his house. The roof had fallen down and the windows were broken. He saw an old dog, which looked like Wolf. "Wolf!" he shouted. But the dog went away. He went into the house. It was empty. The village inn was not there, and a large building stood in its place. Many people stood in front of the building, but there were no people whom he remembered. One of them walked slowly to Rip and said, "Why do you have a shotgun on your shoulder? Are you going to use it in this village?" "Oh, no, sir. I am a poor, quiet man," answered Rip. "Then why do you come to our village with a shotgun?" "I come here to look for my neighbors." Where's Vedder? Where's Dutcher? Vedder? He has been dead for 18 years. Dutcher was killed in the war. The gentleman told him all about the village and the people. How surprised Rip was when he heard of those sad changes in his village. He found himself alone in the world. Every word he heard puzzled him. Does anyone here know Rip Van Winkle? Rip said at last. Oh, Rip Van Winkle! He's over there! Rip saw a man standing by the tree. He looked like Rip himself. Rip was confused and said, Rip Van Winkle? Then who am I? One of them asked what and who he was. God knows, he cried. I am not myself. I am somebody else. I was myself last night, but while I was fast asleep on the mountain, everything changed, and I am changed. I can't tell what or who I am. The people thought him mad and looked at one another. A baby began to cry. The mother said, Don't cry, Rip. The name of the child and the voice of the mother reminded Rip of something. He asked the young mother, What is your father's name? Ah, Rip Van Winkle was his name. But it's 20 years since he went away from home with his shotgun. Nobody has seen or heard from him since then. His dog came back without him. Both my brother and I were very little then. Rip's voice was trembling. And where's your mother? Oh, she died a few years ago. Rip took his daughter and her child in his arms. I am your father. How surprised she was. The people looked at Rip and then said, Sure, you're Rip Van Winkle. Welcome home again. Where have you been these 20 years? Rip quickly told them what had happened to him. The eyes of his neighbors were wide open when they heard his story. Those 20 years had passed like only one night for Rip. He was taken to his daughter's home to live with her family. Even to this day, when people hear thunder on a summer afternoon near the Catskill Mountains, they say that the little strange men are playing ninepins. Joseph and his brothers. Jacob lived in Canaan with his 12 sons. Most of them were adults, but Joseph was a boy of 17, and Benjamin, the youngest, was still a young child. Jacob loved each one of them, but he loved Joseph more than any other son because he was born when Jacob was very old, and because he was good and thoughtful. One day, Jacob gave him a long, colorful coat with wide sleeves. When his brothers knew that Jacob loved Joseph best, they were so jealous that they were not kind to him. One night, Joseph had a strange dream. He told it to them. "Listen to the strange dream that I had last night," he said. "We were tying up sheaves of wheat in the field. Just then my sheaf stood up by itself, and all your sheaves came around it and bowed down to my sheaf." "Do you think," they laughed and said, "you will someday become a king and rule over us?" After a few days, Joseph had another dream. This time he saw in his dream the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowing to him. Jacob said to him, "Shall we bow to you in the future?" The brothers got very angry with him, but Jacob thought that his dreams meant something important. One day, Joseph's brothers were taking care of their flock of sheep in the field. Jacob wished to send word to them. He called Joseph and said, "I will send you to your brothers. Go and see if they are all well, and if the sheep are well taken care of." So Joseph put on the fine coat of bright colors and started out. The brothers saw him in the distance, and one of them said, "Look, the dreamer is coming. This is a good chance. Let's kill him and throw his body into a pit, and then tell our father that a wild beast ate him. Then we'll see if his dreams come true." But Reuben, one of the brothers, felt sorry for him and said, "He's our brother. Throw him into this pit in the field and he'll die." Reuben was planning to return and pull him out of the pit after the other brothers went away. Just then a caravan passed by with their camels. They were on their way to Egypt. Judah, the oldest brother, said, "We'd better not kill him as Reuben said. Why not sell him to the merchants of the caravan? They'll take him to Egypt and sell him as a slave." The other brothers thought this was a good idea, so they took off Joseph's fine coat and sold him to these men. Then the brothers killed a goat and dipped his coat in its blood. They also tore it to pieces and brought it to their father. "Look, father," they said, "we have found this coat in the field. This is the coat you gave Joseph, isn't it?" Jacob knew it at once. He said, "It's my son's coat. Perhaps a wild beast has eaten him. Joseph has been torn to pieces. I will mourn for my son." Joseph's father wept for him for many days. Joseph was taken down to Egypt, and there he was sold to a rich man named Potiphar. Potiphar was an officer in the army of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Now Joseph was a very able young man. He did all that his master told him to do. So Potiphar trusted him and let him take care of his house and everything in it. Joseph worked very hard, but Potiphar's wife was angry with him because he did not try to please her. She told a lie about him and told her husband to send him to prison. Potiphar believed her and put him in prison. When he was in prison, 2 men were sent there by the king of Egypt. One was the king's chief butler, and the other was his baker. One night they had strange dreams which they could not understand. "In my dream," said the butler, "I saw a vine with 3 branches. Then the buds blossomed. They turned into grapes. I picked these grapes and filled Pharaoh's cup with their juice and gave it to Pharaoh." Joseph answered, 3 branches mean 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will call you back out of prison, and you'll serve him as a butler again. When you're set free, please remember me and help me out of this prison." The baker also hoped to hear good news from Joseph and told his dream. "On my head, I had 3 baskets full of white bread. On the top basket, there was every kind of food which Pharaoh liked. Then the birds came and ate it all up." When Joseph heard this, he said sadly, 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days, you'll be hanged upon a tree, and birds will come to eat your dead body. 3 days later, their dreams came true. The butler was set free and the baker was hanged. But the butler was so happy that he forgot all about Joseph. 2 years passed by. Joseph was still in prison. One night, Pharaoh had a strange dream. The next morning, he called all the magicians and wise men of Egypt, but no one could tell him the meaning of his dream. Then suddenly, the butler remembered Joseph in prison. He said to the king, "There's a young man who can understand your dream. When I was in prison, he explained my strange dream to me." Joseph was sent for at once. He put on new clothes and came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh began to tell about his dream. "I was standing on the bank of the Nile. Then 7 fat cows came up from the river and ate grass. After that, 7 thin cows came up from the water and ate up the 7 fat cows. Then I woke up. Joseph said to Pharaoh, God has told you what to do. The 7 fat and thin cows mean 7 years. For the first 7 years, Egyptians will have rich crops of wheat. For the next 7 years, they'll have almost no food to eat because of famine in the country. Now find an able and wise man and let him rule the country. During the 7 good years, you must take as much wheat from all Egypt as you can and store it against the next 7 years, and there'll be plenty of food for all the people. Pharaoh was very pleased to hear that. He said, Can we find a man like you? There's no one as wise as you in our country. I'll let you rule over the whole of Egypt. I'm sure you can help this country out of many difficulties because God is with you. He took off his ring and put it on Joseph's finger. When Joseph became the ruler of Egypt, he was only 30 years old. After the 7 good years, the 7 bad years began. There was a famine in every country, but in Egypt there was still bread. So not only Egyptians but the whole world came to Joseph to buy wheat. Jacob and his family in Canaan had no food to eat either. When Jacob heard that there was plenty of wheat in Egypt, he told his sons to go down and buy some wheat, but he did not let his youngest son Benjamin go with them. The sons came to Egypt and asked the ruler to sell them some wheat. As soon as Joseph saw them, he knew that they were his brothers. "Where do you come from?" asked Joseph. "We have come from Canaan to buy food," they answered, and bowed to Joseph. He said to himself, "I remember the dreams I had in my young days. My dreams have come true." "You must be spies," he said roughly. "No, sir. We're all sons of one man in Canaan. Our family has 12 children. The youngest is still with our father, and one was lost," said the sons. "No," said Joseph, "you're spies. I'll put you all in prison." As they did not know he could understand what they were talking about, they said to one another, "More than 20 years ago we sold Joseph to the caravan. This is why we have to suffer." When Joseph heard this, he turned his face away and wept. Then he spoke as roughly as before. "I'll let you go back to your father, except one of you. You may take food to the members of your hungry family. If you're honest men, bring your youngest brother here, and I'll believe that you aren't spies." They left Simeon behind and returned to Canaan, and told Jacob the whole story. Then they opened the sacks of wheat and were surprised to find on top of them the money they paid to the ruler. They said, "We must take Benjamin and this money to Egypt." But Jacob said, "Joseph is gone, Simeon has gone too, and now you're taking Benjamin. If anything happens to Benjamin, I'll die of sorrow." When they ate up all the food from Egypt, Jacob told his sons to go to Egypt again. This time Jacob had decided to let Benjamin go with them. The brothers started with Benjamin and the money and a gift from Canaan. When Joseph saw Benjamin among them, he told his steward to get a big dinner ready for all of them. As they were brought into Joseph's house, they were very frightened and said, "He must be angry with us. He'll say we have stolen the money." So they told the steward about the money in their sacks. "Don't be worried," he said. "I think your God put it in your sacks." Then he brought Simeon out of prison to them. At noon, Joseph appeared before them. They bowed and presented the gift from Canaan. He said to them, "Is your father well? Is he still alive?" Then he looked at his brother Benjamin and asked, "Is this your youngest brother?" Joseph's heart was so full of love for them that he went into another room and wept. When dinner was served, Joseph himself led each of them from the oldest to the youngest to their seats. They wondered, "How did he know the order of our ages?" Then he served each of them with dishes from his table and gave Benjamin 5 times as much as the other brothers. They drank with him and all became merry. Joseph could no longer control his feelings and said to them, "I am Joseph. I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold to the caravan. Don't be afraid. Come near me. Is my father still alive?" The brothers were too frightened to speak a word and only looked at one another. Joseph said, "God sent me here before you in order to let me help you and our father. God has made me ruler of all Egypt. Go and tell my father all you have seen." He threw his arms around Benjamin and wept. He kissed all his brothers and had a long, happy talk with them. The next day he said to them, "Go home quickly and bring our father here. Take these wagons for all of you and our father." When Jacob heard the story from his sons and saw the wagons, he said with joy, "My son is still alive. I'll go and see him before I die." Jacob set out for Egypt with his sons. They arrived there safe and sound and lived happily for a long time. The Hungry Wolf. Once there was a wolf. He looked like a big dog. He was very hungry and was looking for food in the field. After a while, he met a ram. The ram was eating grass. The hungry wolf went up to the ram and said, "Mr. Ram, I am going to eat you." But the ram said, "I am not afraid of you. Who are you?" "I am a wolf. I am looking for a good dinner," said the wolf. "What kind of wolf are you?" asked the ram. "You are not a wolf. You must be a dog." "No, I'm a wolf," said the wolf. The ram said, "If you're a wolf, stand at the bottom of that hill and open your mouth. Then I will run down the hill and jump into your mouth." "All right," said the wolf. The wolf went to the bottom of the hill. He stood firmly on the ground and opened his mouth. The ram climbed to the top of the hill and then ran down the hill very fast. He hit the wolf as hard as he could. The wolf rolled over and lost his senses with the blow. The ram ran away and went home. After a while, the wolf came to his senses. All his bones were aching. The wolf said to himself, "How foolish I am!" He was even hungrier now. Then the wolf saw a horse. The horse was walking in the field. He approached the horse. The wolf said, "Mr. Horse, I am going to eat you." But the horse said, "You are only a dog." "No, I'm not a dog. I am a wolf," said the wolf. "Oh, if you are a wolf, it is all right," said the horse, "but I am not fat enough. Begin to eat my tail first. While you are eating, I will eat some more grass to get fatter." When the wolf tried to eat the horse's tail, the horse kicked him as hard as he could. The wolf rolled over and over, and the horse galloped off. The wolf thought, "How foolish I am! No one begins to eat a horse from the tail." He was getting hungrier and hungrier. Soon afterwards, the hungry wolf found that a pig was coming toward him. The wolf said, "Mr. Pig, I want to eat you." "Who are you?" asked the pig. "I am a wolf," answered the wolf. "You're a strange sort of wolf," said the pig. "You are only a dog. Wag your tail." "No, I am a real wolf," said the wolf. "Well then, that is all right," said the pig. "Sit down on my back. I will give you a ride, and then you may eat me." The wolf sat down on the pig's back. Then the pig carried him into the village. There were a great many dogs in the village. When the pig and the wolf came near the village, all the dogs ran out. They leaped on the wolf and bit him. The wolf tried to break away. At last he was able to run away into the forest. In the end, he still had nothing to eat.